Well, I reached about 35 minutes on this video and then I got absolutely fed up. So here's what I've done so far. There may be other stuff to come, but if I can be bothered. But the reality is, it's all much of the same. Almost everything that Taffy does can be debunked. All he needs to do is put a little bit of thought into it, and he wouldn't show himself up to be the fool that he is. I hope you enjoy what I've done so far. It's a bit bitty, but I've enjoyed doing it so far. And there is a little bit of a giggle at the end because I lost it, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much. Okay, Taffy, if you look at the NASA website where you get your photos from, it does tell you that this software package you're looking at is the one that they used for their panoramas and their photo merging. You'll find it quite difficult to use. I did have a look at it, but decided that it wasn't worth learning a new tool just for this video. So I've gone on to use Photoshop, which I'm very familiar with. So I thought I'd have a go at that, and the next few minutes I'll show you how we did a photo merge in Photoshop and demonstrate some of the anomalies that you think are just weird. Okay, let's now have a look at the two photographs that are merged together that exercise Taffy's little mind. He's worried the fact that when they're stitched together, we have here a Rousseau cross, and if we zoom in, he's right on this left hand image. There isn't a Rousseau cross here on the top of the rock. In fact, it wouldn't be in line with this one. It's something else he points out. It's quite right. Well spotted, Taffy. But if we look at the left hand image and zoom in on the left hand image, the Rousseau cross does exist in line with these ones. Spooky. How did that happen then when you merge them? Well, handily for Taffy, he did not present us with the file that was merged. We don't have access to that from his long list of images and links. Doesn't matter because Photoshop's clever. It does have an automate function and it will auto stitch these together. So if I go to File, Automate, Photo Merge, then browse for the two images I want to merge, which is going to be that right hand one and that left hand one. Say OK. You see here I've got my two files here. I did append their name with the word merge, so I knew which ones I was going to merge together. Just makes them easier to spot. And then if you look down here, the type of merging I want, there's all sorts of different types. They all have a similar result. They do distort the images in subtly different ways. I like cylindrical. Won't quite look exactly like Taffy's, but if Taffy, as he says, has a copy of Photoshop, he should be able to do this himself. I say OK now, it will go off and it will merge those. And if you do have your own copy, Taffy, you can do this and you can test all of those different variants of layout. The perspective, the conical, the cylindrical, and they all produce subtly different sort of images, but they all do the same thing. And what they do is, if I zoom in on the rock, you can see a Rousseau cross has appeared. The one that was in the right hand image is now appearing on top of the rock, and what worries Taffy is that, I guess he's looking at the bottom and saying, this all, let's go down a bit, this all belongs to the left hand image. How come, if that's the left hand image, there's a cross there? Well, the reason is, Taffy, is how photo merge works. You seem to think they'll use a straight line. They don't. And in fact, if you look close, you can see this little white line here. There's a white line there. That's currently in place. That'll disappear if I accept this edit. But that shows you, let's go to layers. If I turn off the left hand image, you can see that the edge isn't straight, and that's so it's not visible. It does it using algorithms to determine the best view after merging. And if I switch back to the left hand side, you can see, and they all do the same, they all take out this top peak. So where the top peak comes from is the right hand image. That's why it's there. Just to demonstrate very quickly, we won't labour on it, but if I do another automate, we'll just choose one of the other layout options so that you don't think I have just chosen the one that proves the point, because they all do the same. I've tested them all. That one plus that one. Okay. Let's go for perspective. Let it do the image for us. Does the same, looks at the images, has a play around with them, see how they best fit together, determines where to do the sort of merge line, which is not a straight line, and then it will present us with the resultant image. Having a bit of a think this time, but there it comes. You can see the line of the join. It's got a layers. Switch off the left hand side, and again I think you can see, if we zoom in here, if it's going to let me zoom in, it's going to let me zoom in. Oh, too much. Back to the hand. You can see here the image is going to appear on the top of the combined composite merged image, and there it is. The other thing about this photograph, and it's a shame you won't let us have sight of the original one he's working with, was that he varied the brightness and he saw anomalies when he did so. So let's take this original, we will add a layer adjustment layer for brightness. Okay, and I will adjust the brightness from dark all the way up to bright, and we don't really see any anomalies coming up. We do see it becoming burnt out in this area, and you're causing a bit of overbleed both up here and around the rock here, just because we're pushing the brightness too far, but we don't see any other anomalies. Unfortunately, Taffy and his overactive imagination see all sorts of things. Okay, let's consider something else that is exercising Taffy. He doesn't like the fact that that shadow isn't as long as he thinks it is. What he's telling us is that if we have an angle of sun of 13 degrees, that the shadow would be meters and meters long. Let's take that as the big rock base. And what do you know? Taffy's got a point. With an angle of 13 degrees, the shadow should indeed be out here. You might have caught us here, Taffy. Looks like you're right. But wait a minute. Has Taffy ever been right? To know, what would the angle of the sun have to be to create the shadow that we have in the image? Let's have a look. Let me see if we... If we take it from the shadow on the ground to where it would first touch the rock, about somewhere about there, No good, that's a black line on a black sky. Let's go green line for us all. And we take the base of the rock again. So as you saw, for that shadow that exists in the photograph to be a true representation, the angle is going to be 40 to 41. Let's say 40. So 40 degrees. So Taffy's right. If the sun's angle is 13 degrees, the sun would have to actually be somewhere near 40 degrees for this to be the shadow cast. But Taffy's never been right, has he? So let's have a think about this. Do something called research. Okay, let's go to the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, which is where Taffy spends a lot of his time. He gets all his images from here. And if you just looked a little bit further, there's a page here called Sun Angles. And what we're interested in, because those two photographs came from Apollo 17 EVA3. So we'll scroll down, we'll see if we find Apollo 17. There we go, Apollo 17 EVA3. Oh, look at that. At the start of EVA3, the sun angle was at 39 degrees, and at the end of EVA3, it was 42.6 degrees. Well, Taffy, if you'd done a bit of research, you wouldn't have embarrassed yourself by telling us all it was 13 degrees and that the shadow length should be 72 feet. I will commend you on the fact that 72 feet would be the right length of shadow for a 13 degrees sun angle. Well done, but I bet you subcontracted that calculation. Okay, Taffy, here's an image for you. I want to use a method on this that looks to see whether there's been any digital alteration to this photograph. But first you need to know a little bit about JPEG, so I reckon you should go and do some study of your own. I'm not going to do all your research for you. Excuse me. But what we have, every time we save a JPEG, is compression of the pixels. So they get compressed each time it is saved. And when you do a digital alteration at some point during the life cycle of a JPEG image, often the bits that you add in your manipulation of the photograph are sort of newer than the existing JPEG compressed elements. So a technique called ELA looks at the compressed bits in your image. It saves a heavily compressed version of your image and it compares the two to see how the two sort of age, and it shows you where the aging process is sort of different. Now, that's very much an oversimplification of the technique, but if we look at this image here, I hope you've had time to look at it. And can you see what has been added to this? Of course you can, because you've got eagle eyes. I bet you saw straight away. If you look there, this face mask has been digitally added to this photograph. I bet you saw that straight away, didn't you? But as you can see, all of the rows, you can see the shapes of the people there. Things that are of the same sort of texture or the same sort of colour background, they tend to be treated very similarly in terms of the compression. But this is a good image. There's not much changed around there except that bit. So you can see fairly clearly that this image has been altered. Let's do the same with one of your favourite images, Taffy. Okay, Taffy, my boy, here it is. Your image where you believe you can see some form of bird. Let me help you out here. This image here. You believe that the shadow here, let me show it to you. You believe that there's a bird shown here. These highlights are clearly from the sun. I think you think there's an ear there, a mouth here. I think you think there's feet and a bit of food. I assume you think that's a wing of some form. I think that's what you say when you look at this, don't you? Okay, let's have a look at this image to see if there's been any manipulation as evidenced through ELA. Okay, there you go. What I can see here is everything is uniform. The sky, the sort of mid background, the front background, all areas that should be the same are the same. And if we just get a closer look at your bird, Taffy, not a thing. Not one pixel in that area appears from this type of analysis to have ever been anywhere other than where it is. It's not been added later, not been moved or manipulated as far as this analysis shows. So that shows you talk rubbish. But I want to look at this photograph in another tool alongside a second image, because you've really been disingenuous. So this is your photograph, Taffy, with your bird in the corner. What you've not told anyone is that there's another photograph available. It's the very next one in the sequence. Just add 1 to the number you use to find this, and you'll find that there it exists. And let me switch on my scribbling. Oops, didn't want to do that, did I? You can see that there's your shadow. But what causes that shadow? Look at this. A massive rock casts that shadow. Have you shown this to anyone before, Taffy? Or have you never seen it? This was one of a stereo pair. The one you use plus this one was supposed to produce a stereo pair. And I must admit, I've never seen the stereoscopic image as a result of this. But there are 2 images, and if we look at them, 2 of them, you can see that the perspective changes correctly. As we move to the right, the shadow bends the correct way for a move to the right, and if we move to the left, it bends the correct way. So everything here is totally in perspective. Those 2 photographs show a shadow on the ground that you think looks like an animal, but in reality it just exists as a shadow from a rock. Sorry, Taffy. I hope you're going to remove all your videos that assert this one, but I doubt it. Well, Taffy, here's another favourite image of yours. I've done an ELA on it and there's no corrections at all made to this photograph. But you believe this thing in the middle is the face of a pig. Well, I agree with you, it does look like a face. I don't think it's the face of a pig. It looks like the face of a human being to me. But that's what we humans see in things, isn't it? But again, you've been very disingenuous with your viewers. Did you tell them this was one of a series of 6 where that image appears? Starts there on the left. If you look there, the eyes are horizontal. And as we move and pan, because this was a series of pan, moves around, you see the face changes in perspective. And we get here, you can see that the eyes are angling upwards, showing you that this was taken on site with that in place, and that as the pan moved around, the perspective of these three rocks changed, and you can see it yourself. You just have to use images 39, 40, 41, 42, 43 and 44. Okay, here's the image Taffy is telling us there are 10 hidden whistleblower clues. These are probably things that look like faces. He did say one of them looks like an eye. He loves seeing things that look like eyes because he thinks something that looks like an eye says, look here. But poor old Taffy, he's knocking on a bit now and he sees all sorts everywhere. Let's have a look at the error level analysis of this image. Ooh, Taffy, what do you think of that? Everything is as it should be. All the areas that are of the same texture are of the same texture. There's nothing untowards anywhere here. Some white dots here though. There and there and there. Now when we zoom in and have a look at those, you can see the dirt on the image. The dirt on the image here is being picked up as an anomaly. Interesting. You can see that it is quite sensitive. So if you can see 10 problems in that photograph, or things added by whistleblowers, you're dreaming. This photograph has had no digital manipulation whatsoever. Let's have a look at its metadata. You told us that you use, was it HXD or HDX hex viewer, which is fine. I assume that's what you're doing when I looked at the sort of proxy where you're displaying Adobe Photoshop on every image. It's not necessary to do that, Taffy. What you're looking at is what's called XMP data, which is available in the EXIF information within photographs, or they're calling it here metadata. This one may not have Adobe, it doesn't on it, it doesn't say it does there, but if we load a photograph that has been in Adobe, then it will be down here and it will tell you exactly what it means, which would be interesting for you because you could see why it says Adobe. Often it's just because it's been through an Adobe package. A lot of people just use Adobe as their photo viewer. They don't necessarily use it for manipulating. They may do what you do, they may tweak the brightness because it suits their purpose. Sometimes some of these images look a little bit better dimmed down because the sun was quite bright, and a little bit of adjustment goes a long way. So get yourself an EXIF viewer and you'll see the same information. Adobe will be in there, but it'll tell you why it's in there. And if you're lucky, it may even have the Adobe history in there, which shows you what manipulation's taken place. Okay, Taffy, let's look at a photograph we're familiar with. This is one that we've seen earlier. I merged this photograph in Photoshop and saved it. So you recognise that. This is one, if you remember, we showed you how foolish you were to think the sun was at 13 degrees when it was really at 40 degrees, and that there is a plus there and it comes from the right hand image, not the left hand image, and that's because photo merge does something like that. It's a squiggly line, not a straight line, because straight lines are visible. But you get all this information in the EXIF file. It's structured properly. Rather than looking at a hex viewer, just if you've got a Photoshop, you can look at this. You can go online and you can use an EXIF reading tool. They're freely available online. Just upload the image and it'll show you all this information. It tells you it's a JPEG image, all sorts of technical information, its width, its height, etc. The EXIF information, if that was a camera, it'd tell you things like your focal length, the shutter speed, all those sorts of things. Ooh, I bet you don't like the look of that, Taffy, do you? Photoshop. Here you go. It tells you lots and lots of bits of information. The fact it's a 1-to-1 scale. The copyright flag isn't set, so it's not had its copyright information written in. Because it's photo mode, it's saved this as a panorama, and the tool used here for both reading and writing was Adobe Photoshop. And for information, the version I'm using is 2017 XMP. This is more and more information. Interesting stuff here. I've removed that. That bit of information is identifying. So because it's my user name. Again, image format JPEG, the color mode RGB, and the color profile in use is the sRGB, the normal standard. You may get confused sometimes, Taffy, because you might see there's something called Adobe RGB. So some photos just use Adobe RGB as their color space, and that might confuse you sometimes because it doesn't necessarily come from Adobe product to use Adobe RGB as the color space. Creation, dates and times. History. Look at this. What happened to this product? The photo merge tool was run. Then over here it was saved. So we ran the photo merge and we saved this file at the time. So it tells me actually what we did. So you can see on this one I've done no manipulation of that file. I photo merged it and we saved it. That's all that happens. You may be looking in some of your EXIF information to have the Photoshop history. Then you've got color profiles at the bottom. Lots of information about black points, white points, etc. Which is all very technical. We don't want to get into all of that. So instead of your hex viewer, Taffy, try and dump some of your information into an EXIF viewer and you'll get all of this information. All for you.
Or didn't you know that the moon takes 28 days to go around the Earth? 28 days, Brant. Didn't you know that?
A little bit of research, Taffy, and you can see that 27 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes, 11.6 seconds is the moon's real orbital period. But shame on you, look where we found this bit of research. Primary homework help. Shame on you, Taffy. Shame on you. And from your video, Mr. Strange, what's Tim Peake doing in the background on that big screen? Spooky. Must be something strange to prove that the ISS isn't real. What is he doing? Look at that screen. Is that a green screen? No, it's not. Look at this. Tim Peake is actually here doing some videos for the Astro Academy. There's loads of these. Just search and you'll find them. Lots of good stuff. And finally, Mr. Strange and I have had a conversation. And as you can see here, if you read it carefully, he says, "You're too arrogant. I can tell you it isn't humans that are running the show." No, sorry. I can't carry on. This is what we're up against. Thank you. Goodbye.